Hey guys, tonight we're plunging into the gloomy, gaslit streets of Victorian England, where every corner hides a cough, a creak, or a creature. You lie in bed, but in this story that bed isn't soft or clean. It's a lumpy mattress, stuffed, with horsehair and old straw, sitting under a cracked window that lets in just enough chill to rattle your teeth. There's a fire in the grate, but it's burning low, mostly coal, thick, sooty, clinging coal. You shift your weight and, crunch, that's not a bug. Yet. It's soot, a fine dark dust that has drifted down all night, gently settling onto your pillow like the worst kind of snow. It's in your hair, it's in your mouth, and it's absolutely in your lungs. And yes, that cough, that's not a cold. That's the blackened signature of a home warmed by coal, surrounded by factories in a city where breathing is a dangerous hobby. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment with where you're listening from and your local time, because whether it's midnight in Manchester or 3 a.m. in Texas, you're part of this odd little time-traveling family. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stretch in bed and squint through the filthy glass panes. Outside, the world is still grey. Not twilight grey or rainy day grey, but ash and fog grey. In London, alone, thousands of chimneys belch out smoke every morning, like an angry orchestra of coal-powered demons. Every house has one. The wealthier the neighbourhood, the more chimneys to clog the sky. Historians still argue whether Victorian air pollution had a more direct role in shortening lifespans or just worsening daily life, but everyone agrees on one thing. The air you breathe is the same air that could kill a canary. You rub your eyes. Your hands are stained. Maybe from the hearth. Maybe from your pillow. Either way, you're not getting that out without boiling water and lye soap, which stings your hands like betrayal. You cough again. It's always the same sound, hollow, persistent, echoing in tenement halls and fancy parlours alike. No one escapes it. Consumption, they whisper. Tuberculosis by its clinical name. It takes your neighbours one by one, often slowly. Ironically, it was so common it even became fashionable, romanticised, as the wasting disease, where pale skin and delicate frames were seen as beautiful, not deadly, but you're not thinking about that just yet. First, you swing your legs over the bed, careful not to step in the bucket tucked beside it. Indoor plumbing? That's a fantasy. That sloshing pail? That's your midnight toilet. Good morning. Your feet hit the floor, and your toes brush something that skitters. Don't scream, just another rat, or maybe a beetle, or something worse. Victorian homes are filled with uninvited guests, from mice in the walls to fleas in the seams of your bedding. And those aren't just annoyances, they're messengers of misery. Fleas brought plague, remember? Your water pitcher is dry. Of course, it is. You forgot to refill it last night from the hand pump down the street. But that pump? That water? Yeah. You'd better boil it. Or don't. It might be safer to chew on a brick than drink untreated city water. You shuffle toward the fireplace to rekindle the flames. If you're lucky, there's coal left. If not, you'll use whatever scraps you can find. Paper, sticks, maybe a bit of animal dung. Don't wrinkle your nose, it's common enough. You cradle the match and strike it against the rough brick. The flame flares. You lean in. For a moment, the flickering glow reflects off something on the mantel. A family photo, maybe. Black and white, of course. No one smiles. People rarely did. They had bad teeth and little reason to look joyful. Remember, this is a time when posing for a photograph meant sitting completely still for up to 2 minutes. Try smiling through that. You glance back at your bedding. A lumpy mound under the thin coverlet. Horsehair, straw, sometimes moss if you're poor, or just unlucky. Bedbugs love it. So do lice. People talk about a hard day's work, but no one talks about a hard night's sleep like the Victorians could. You slept in a cloud of dust, noise, and the very real chance that your mattress was growing a second ecosystem. Still, you push forward. That's what you do. That's what everyone does. Because the truth is, this is normal. Normal to cough. Normal to wheeze. Normal to breathe in death and call it weather. You wrap yourself in a shawl. Careful not to knock over the candle stub from last night. You haven't yet figured out how it managed to leak wax onto the wall, but now it looks like a scene from a Victorian ghost story, which, let's be honest, could be your Tuesday.quirky tidbit for today. In some households, it was believed that hanging bundles of herbs, especially lavender and rosemary, by the bed would both mask the smell and ward off evil spirits. Spoiler: the herbs did nothing, but at least your bedroom smelled like a funeral parlour. You walk to the window, fingers tracing the wooden frame warped by damp. You scrape back a corner of the curtain. More soot. More grey. Children coughing, horses dragging carts, milkmen calling out, their voices muffled by the fog. And in that moment, maybe you understand why Victorian poets were so obsessed with melancholy. It wasn't drama, it was just daily life. You shuffle across the creaking floorboards toward what might generously be called a kitchen, though it's really just a corner of the room with a chipped basin and a scorched kettle. The chill hasn't left your bones, not that it ever truly does, and your stomach makes a sound that would startle a less experienced Victorian. But before you get to eat, you must face the most important question of the day. Is the milk moving again? Victorian breakfast isn't glamorous. In fact, it's a culinary gamble. You lift the lid of the milk jug carefully, because sometimes the cream at the top has turned green overnight, and sometimes it's still twitching. No, not because it's haunted, because food adulteration is the norm. The milkman, eager to stretch his product and his profits, likely watered it down and added chalk to make it look thick, or plaster of Paris if he was feeling bold. Historians still argue whether these practices were primarily born from greed or necessity, but either way, your intestines are going to file a complaint later. You reach for bread next. Ah yes, white, fluffy, lovely, and cut with alumite. Keep it bright and soft. This lovely loaf might give you indigestion, neurological symptoms, or a slow decline into general malaise. But hey, it looks great on the plate. Your tea, swept from the factory floor and dyed with iron sulfate. Even the sugar might be stretched with sand or plaster. There's something poetic about sweetening your morning brew with the stuff used to patch walls, and don't even look at the butter. If it's not laced with yellow dye to hide how rancid it is, it's probably not butter at all. There were reports of butter being mixed with mashed up animal organs, because apparently nothing says good morning like a bit of kidney spread on toast. Still hungry? Excellent. You grab a fork, maybe with an ivory handle, if you're posh enough, and marvel at how heavy it is. Victorian tableware is notoriously sturdy, sometimes doubling as a blunt weapon during dinner arguments. But more alarmingly, it's often made with lead. Yes, actual lead. Painted plates, pewter mugs, even the bright green paint on the teacup rim, all packed with enough poison to make your hair fall out in clumps if you're not careful. But it's so pretty, isn't it? Here's your quirky fact of the day. Victorian chefs occasionally used arsenic to make cake frosting whiter and more appealing. One particularly grim event saw a group of mourners poisoned at a funeral tea because the baker confused arsenic with flour. The dead increased by one more. As you nibble your chemically enhanced breakfast, you think about how much effort it takes to simply survive a meal. Not thrive, just survive. And the really upsetting part? This is the food of the middle class. The poor don't even get plaster bread. They get crusts, if anything. Maybe a bit of rancid lard spread thinly across a heel of loaf, so dry it could be used as insulation. You think about fruit, maybe an apple, maybe a tomato, though at this time some people still think tomatoes are suspiciously foreign, exotic, possibly toxic. Though in fairness, it's not the tomato's fault. It's just that everything else on the table might actually kill you first. Even water is a risk. You want a drink? You'd better hope it came from a clean well and not the city's pipe system, which snakes under the streets alongside the sewer lines. Cross-contamination isn't just a health risk, it's a lifestyle. The phrase, "you are what you eat," hits differently when what you eat is 15% limestone powder and God knows what kind of beetle protein. You glance at your hands again. Stained from coal, marked by your bed, and now slightly sticky from whatever. That was on the knife. You wipe them on your apron. It doesn't help. Victorian kitchens aren't known for their hygiene. There's no such thing as antibacterial anything. You clean with vinegar, or maybe a rough rag soaked in whatever water you could find. Now you hear the scrape of boots overhead. Your neighbour's up. He's probably starting his day the same way you did, by checking if the milk's turned to
paste and whether the rats made off with the oat bin. You sigh and lean back in your chair, which creaks like a haunted music box. Your belly is half full, but your heart, that's just trying to get through the day without contracting dysentery.
You sip the last of your tea, lukewarm and maybe faintly metallic. You consider skipping breakfast tomorrow, but you know you won't. There's comfort in routine, even if the routine is hazardous. And maybe, just maybe, your body's gotten used to the daily dose of poison. Like a Victorian superhero, immune to chalk bread, lead mugs and kidney butter. Still, part of you misses the countryside, where you think the air is cleaner and the food slightly less adulterated. But don't get too dreamy. Even in rural areas, people have been known to buy bright green candies dyed with copper arsenite. Children love them. Unfortunately, their bodies didn't. Historians still debate whether Victorian society was truly
ignorant of these dangers or simply desensitized by necessity.
What's clearer is that reform only came after years of avoidable deaths and a few particularly dramatic poisonings that made the newspapers too uncomfortable to ignore. As you gather your things and push the breakfast scene behind you, you can't
help but feel proud. You've survived another meal. You haven't gone blind, convulsed, or dropped dead on the floor yet, which means it's time to face the street. And oh, dear listener, you're not ready for what's outside.
You step outside and the world punches you in the lungs. The air isn't air. It's a sticky, greyish-brown fog that clings to your skin like wet wool and smells like cold smoke, horse sweat, and something vaguely rotting. You blink once, twice, still can't see more than a few feet ahead. Welcome to the commute. Your boots, if you own any, sink slightly into the road. It's not paved, not really. It's more like a mash of dirt, horse dung, ash, broken bricks, and the occasional puddle of something that might be soup or might be human waste. You try not to think about it. You fail. A cart lurches past you, pulled by a limping horse with a vacant stare. Its driver doesn't say a word, just flicks the reins and disappears into the haze. You watch the steam from the horse's body rise into the mist. That's the cleanest part of your morning. Historians still argue whether Victorian cities were more dangerous due to crime or environmental hazards, but either way, just being outside is a health risk. You sidestep a bloated dog carcass, try not to gag. There's a dead cat near the lamppost too, and you swear it's been there 3 days. It's hard to say though, so much of the street blends together into
one unpleasant smear of decay and resignation. Carts jostle for space.
Pedestrians dodge piles of manure. There's no traffic control, no sidewalks to speak of, and no such thing as pedestrian right-of-way. It's a wonder more people didn't get run over by their neighbours' milk deliveries. And then come the smells. Layers of them. Hot tar from a leaking lamppost. Sewage bubbling from a cracked gutter. A nearby tannery stinging your nose with the sharp bite of ammonia and animal flesh. Somewhere behind you, someone is frying fish, but even that smell turns sinister when mixed with boiling horse hooves and glue. Ah yes, glue. Did you know Victorian factories often boiled animal parts right in the city? Horses, pigs, cows melted down to make glue, soap or candles. It's the smell of industry, and it's absolutely everywhere. You pass by a factory wall slick with black mould, and a child, maybe 5 years old, sits near the drain, chewing something. You don't ask what. Children learn early not to look too closely. Quirky fact of the day. The phrase, "it's a dog's life," originated during this time, not because dogs had it good, but because they, like you, had to navigate sludge, scraps and disease with no safety net. And often, they did it better than people. Your hands instinctively go to your scarf, not because of the cold, but because of the fog. The London particular, they called it. A choking yellow-black soup of smoke, dust, and industrial debris that crept into your lungs like a slow, determined thief. It's the kind of fog that kills people, not poetically, literally. People were known to wander into canals, disappear into alleyways, or simply collapse from suffocation. And still the city moved on, because the city always moves on. You pass a newsboy coughing his lungs up. He doesn't even pause in shouting headlines. Train crash in Manchester. Cholera outbreak worsens. Queen attends opera. You nod slightly. Maybe buy a paper. Not to read, just to have something clean-ish to hold. You glance at your gloves.
They're stained. Everything is.
You could wash them, but water costs money. And soap? That's a luxury. You cross the street, or try to. A massive coach nearly clips your hip and the driver doesn't flinch. He might not have even seen you through the grime on the windows. You mouth a curse under your breath, Victorian style. Nothing stronger than a whispered blast it, and keep moving. Street vendors call out to you. "Hot heels!" one cries. "2 a penny!" You shake your head. You're not that hungry. Not yet. A woman sells oranges out of a basket. They're bruised, pale, probably weeks old, but they look like gold compared to the meat pies next to them. Meat pies made with mystery fillings and sold warm, but never hot enough to kill what's crawling inside. Historians still debate whether meat pies were a clever disguise for spoiled meat, or simply a delicious way to ignore reality. Either way, you're not biting. You finally reach the corner near your workplace. Maybe a shop, maybe a mill. You pass a man slumped against a lamppost. He might be drunk, he might be dead. No one checks. Because in Victorian cities, you learn quickly, don't stop, don't touch, don't stare too long. The streets are hungry, and they remember the ones who linger. And now, just for fun, let's talk transportation. You could ride the omnibus, if you can afford it. But don't expect comfort. It's noisy, packed, and often steered by men whose idea of braking is shouting. Horse-drawn carriages clog the lanes, and the occasional steam engine chugs along, trailing smoke thick enough to make you blink tears. There's a reason most people walk, not because it's pleasant, but because it's marginally less terrifying than every other option. As you near your workplace, a breeze picks up, and with it comes a truly impressive whiff of rotting cabbage, manure, coal smoke, and, somehow, wet wool. You take a deep breath anyway. It's that or stop breathing altogether. And finally, you arrive. Soot-streaked, drenched in fog, possibly carrying 3 new respiratory infections. And it's only 8 a.m. You made it. You survived the commute. But now comes the fun part. Work. You step inside and it's somehow darker than the street. The factory walls are high, the windows narrow, and the air warmer, yes, but thick with something you can't quite name. Dust, smoke, oil, despair, probably all of the above. Your boots stick slightly as you walk, the floor coated with a mixture of spilled grease, thread clippings, and yesterday's lunch scraps. Somewhere, a belt-driven machine groans to life like an angry, mechanical beast being poked awake. This is your job, or rather, this is your life. You glance to your left. There's a boy, 9, maybe 10, already at his loom, tiny hands flicking between fast-moving threads. He hasn't even wiped the sleep from his eyes. Next to him, a girl with bandaged fingers is winding bobbins. Her bandages are grey from use, and if you look closer, you'll see the faintest stain of blood on the edge. But she keeps working, because she knows what happens if she stops. Victorian child labour wasn't an exception. It was the system. Tiny hands were ideal for delicate machinery. Small bodies could crawl under moving gears to clear jams. And if they lost a finger or a hand, well, there were always more children. You take your position. Maybe you work the loom. Maybe you sort coal. Maybe you're in the matchstick factory, where white phosphorus clings to your skin and turns your jawbone to mush. They call it phossy jaw. It starts with tooth pain and ends with your face falling off. Historians still argue whether the employers truly understood the long-term effects of such exposure or simply ignored it. But the result is the same: pain, disfigurement, and eventually the quiet removal of your name from the payroll. You cough. Again, it's always there, just beneath the surface. The dust in the air isn't like the kind you sweep off a shelf. It's microscopic fibers, floating invisible, scratching their way down your throat and into your lungs, especially in textile mills where cotton fluff coats everything like snow. Quirky fact of the day: mill workers used to keep pet canaries, not for company, but as early warning systems. If the bird dropped dead, it was time to step outside, if your boss allowed it, and bosses rarely allowed it. Your overseer walks past now, bowler hat, cigar. A whistle around his neck like a schoolmaster. He's not cruel, just indifferent. If you lose a hand to the machine, he won't scream. He'll just shout, "Next!" The machines clatter and hum, creating a constant, deafening drone. You can't hear yourself think. You certainly can't. Talk to the person beside you. Communication happens in nods, shrugs, and wide-eyed glances when something goes wrong. You blink. Your eyes sting from the oil fumes. Or maybe the gaslight flickering overhead like it's trying to decide whether to stay lit or give up entirely. Break time doesn't mean rest. It means sitting on an overturned crate, chewing bread so stale you could knock out a rat with it, and hoping the floor doesn't shift beneath you. And even then, someone's watching. Always. Idle hands are frowned upon. Idle hands get replaced. Outside, a bell clangs. Inside, no one moves. You all know better. It's a delivery, coal maybe, or a new barrel of solvent for cleaning parts. The solvents, often benzene or turpentine. And if you get it on your skin, well, you probably won't die. Not right away. You wipe your brow with a rag, and it comes away black. It's not dirt, not exactly. It's factory air turned solid, pressed into your pores like ink. You are becoming part of the building. That's what this place does. It absorbs you, and yet, somehow, you carry on. Because this is the job you could get, the one that pays, barely, and not always in coin. Sometimes in tokens only redeemable. At the company store where prices are, surprise, twice as high as anywhere else. You glance around at your fellow workers. Pale faces, hollow eyes, hands that twitch from muscle memory, even during rest. These aren't the faces you see in Victorian portraits. These are the forgotten ones, the ones who keep the empire spinning its great machines. A clatter. Someone's arm gets snagged. You look away before you see what happens next. It's better not to know. The overseer shouts something, and everything goes back to normal. The machines don't stop. They never stop. You remember hearing about a reformer once. A man who tried to pass laws reducing workdays for children. People called him idealistic, foolish, even dangerous. Children need to learn discipline, they said. Work builds character. You suspect that's something only people with clean hands say. Historians still debate how effective the early factory laws were. Many were poorly enforced or simply ignored by employers who knew inspectors only visited on Tuesdays. The girl beside you sneezes. Into her hands, then back to winding thread. There's no such thing as a sick day, no health insurance. If you can move, you can work. And if you can't work, well, let's just say no one misses a quiet mouth. As the day drags on, you lose track of time. The gas lights flicker into full glow. You didn't even realize the sun had set. Your back aches. Your fingers sting. Your ears ring from the hours of ceaseless machine noise. There's no silence here, only shifts, quitting time. Maybe. A bell rings and slowly the machines wheeze to a halt. You're allowed to go home now, or to the tavern, or to the corner where you collapse with your meager pay and a bit less of yourself than you had this morning. You survived the work day. Congratulations, just 299 more to go this year. You emerge from the factory and immediately regret it. The air outside should feel like a relief, but instead it greets you like a slap. The fog has thickened into a yellow-grey blanket, curling low across the cobblestones and weaving through. Gas lamp hollows like it's trying to smother the light itself. You pull your shawl tighter around your shoulders, not from the cold, but to muffle the fumes clawing at your throat. You're not alone. The streets fill with workers like ants from a cracked wall, faces blackened with soot and oil. No one talks, just coughing, shuffling, maybe the occasional muttered bloody fog. This is just how it is. You're all ghosts in a shared purgatory, walking home through poison, and the truly cursed part of it? You're still expected to dress well while doing it. Victorian fashion doesn't care that you've worked a 12-hour shift, surrounded by whirring steel and boiling chemicals. It expects elegance. It demands structure. Your corset digs in. Your boots rub your heels raw, and your gloves, if you're lucky enough to have a pair, are stiff with last week's grime. Fashion hurts, but fashion also kills. Your dress is green, a beautiful, vibrant green. People say it brings out your eyes. They don't say what's in the dye. Arsenic trioxide. A deadly compound that flakes invisibly into the air, brushing against your skin nestling in your lungs, maybe finding its way into your tea. You try not to think about that. You like this dress. You got it second-hand. The previous owner didn't die because of it? Probably. Historians still argue whether women were aware of the risks of arsenic-laced dyes. Some say they were misled by fashion houses. Others claim everyone knew and wore it anyway. Because social death was more immediate than chemical death, you pass a shop window displaying the newest crinolines, vast domed cages of steel and
cotton that make every woman look like she's preparing for liftoff.
they're gorgeous, they're deadly. One misstep near a fireplace and the fabric ignites like dry hay. You've heard of it happening. You knew a girl once. Her name was Elsie. She didn't even have time to scream. And then there are the stays, boned, corsets that squeeze your ribs, compress your organs, and make breathing something you do in shallow sips. But it's worth it, right? You look refined. You look feminine. You look like you don't do manual labor, even if your hands are calloused from 12-hour days at the loom. Quirky fact of the day. There were documented cases of women accidentally stabbing themselves with their own corset bones when they slipped or fell. The pressure was so intense that the metal punctured skin like a knife. You pass a chemist's window filled with beauty products. White face powder, lead-based. Rouge, mercury-enhanced. Eyeliner, antimony-laced. The more you paint yourself, the more people say you're glowing. And they're not wrong. You're literally irradiating yourself. But what's the alternative? Appear tired, plain, God forbid, natural. You'd be accused of being unwell, uncouth, or worse, working class. You duck into a side alley, hoping for a shortcut. Instead, you're met with puddles, reflecting twisted gaslight shapes, and a stench so strong it could punch holes in your memories. You push forward. The alley narrows. Your skirt catches on a nail jutting from the wall. You pull, hear it here, swear softly, and then, yes, a boutique up ahead, dimly lit but open. A mannequin in the window wears a sapphire blue gown with lace trim and puffed sleeves. You stop, stare. You imagine what it would feel like to wear something like that and not worry about it killing you. Silk, maybe. Imported. Stitched by someone else's suffering. The woman inside sees you. She gives you a look. You know that look. It's the same one you give stray dogs near the butcher. You step back. Keep walking. Historians still debate how. Much class structure was reinforced through fashion alone. But to you, it's not a debate. It's a mirror. One that reflects what you can't have. You finally reach your lodging house. Climb the steps, your skirts feel heavier. They always do after a day like this. Inside, you peel off the layers, carefully. Your stays first, unlacing the cords that have been carving into your back all day. Then the outer skirt, the blouse, the boots. You sit in your chemise and breathe for the first time in hours. Deeply. Too deeply. The air tastes like coal dust and mildew. You notice a red line across your ribs from the corset. It'll bruise tomorrow. You shrug, add it to the collection. You pull out a nightgown. It's simple cotton. Worn thin, but clean. You avoid the mirror. Victorian mirrors are oddly warped, and you don't need help seeing your exhaustion. Your hair is stiff with fog and smoke. You comb it anyway. Victorian beauty standards demand it. Even alone, even at night, you must maintain the image because someone might knock on the door, because someone might look, because being a woman in the Victorian era means being looked at and judged for every wrinkle, every smudge, every tear.
In your petticoat. Outside, the fog thickens again. Gaslight flickers. A shadow crosses the street. You lock the window, not because it's safer, but because it's habit. Tomorrow you'll wear the green dress again, even knowing what it holds. Because
there's no such thing as a safe outfit, only a good illusion, and in Victorian society, illusion is survival. You wake coughing. Again, it's not even fully morning yet, but your lungs don't care about the sun. They care about the fog still leaking through the cracks in the window panes, and the fine black powder of coal smoke that has settled into the folds of your bedding like a second set of sheets. You rise slowly, joints stiff. There's a stiffness that comes from sleep, and then there's Victorian stiffness, the kind that comes from inhaling industrial fumes and sleeping in a damp,
Room where the wallpaper has peeled away to reveal mildew, older than your landlord. You wash your face in a bowl of cold water.
The water smells faintly of iron and something else. Sulfur, maybe. But it's not green, so you count that as a win. Breakfast is rushed, if it happens at all. You're already late. The streets outside look wrong. Like someone painted them, over in yellow chalk and then smeared them with ash. The fog is thicker than yesterday. It moves like it's alive. It tastes metallic. Today, you need to go to the market. You pull your shawl tighter, push open the door, and step into what Victorians romantically called a pea souper. Not for its warmth, for its colour. This is not your usual fog. This is the kind that kills. And yet people go about their day. You hear carts clattering over stones, their drivers wrapped in scarves, soaked from the inside out. You pass a man lighting a gas lamp, and for a second he disappears entirely into the swirling mist. You could walk straight past your own mother and not recognize her until she coughed. You take shallow breaths, not because you're dainty, but because the fog burns if it gets in too deep. It's coal smoke, chimney soot, factory exhaust, and street filth, blended into a creamy grey soup that coats your throat with every breath. Lovely. Historians still argue whether the great smogs of London, particularly the infamous one of 1952, had precursors this deadly during the Victorian era. But contemporary accounts describe days where people simply disappeared in the fog and were found slumped on street corners hours later, blue-lipped and silent. You step carefully. The streets are slippery with unseen puddles. Something squishes underfoot, but you don't look. In this fog, there are things better left unidentified. You hear a scream, muffled, then laughter. Could be a fight. Could be kids playing. Could be a ghost. You keep walking. Quirky fact of the day. One of the many side effects of these thick fogs was a rise in accidental marriages. People would enter the wrong church, follow the wrong procession, or simply misidentify the groom. Imagine standing at the altar and realizing you've said "I do" to the wrong man, because the fog was too thick to see him properly. Victorian romance. You pass a lamplighter again. This one is humming. He lights each post with a long taper, one by one, the flames flickering uselessly in the smog. It's more ritual than illumination, like a child lighting candles in a cave. You catch sight of the Thames, or rather, you smell it first. It hits you like a slap. Raw sewage, rotting fish, dead things and industrial waste, a perfume of decay. The river is invisible behind the fog, but you know it's there, whispering dark secrets and probably melting rats into soup. And yes, there are rats. You hear them before you see them, scratching, squeaking, slipping between cracks in the cobblestones. They thrive in this, they are this. You duck into a butcher's shop for shelter. Inside it's better, warm, damp, bloody. The butcher nods at you and you nod back, pretending not to notice that the cleaver he's holding looks suspiciously like it once belonged to a surgeon. The meats hang in the window, covered in soot. You point to something that might be beef, might be cat. You don't ask. You buy. Back outside, the fog has grown thicker still. The gas lamps now float like eerie will-o'-the-wisps in a fairy tale gone sour. You walk slowly, using the shop fronts to guide you like a blind person reading Braille. The smell of smoke is in your hair, your clothes, your teeth. A woman stumbles past, handkerchief pressed to her mouth.
Her eyes are red. She doesn't stop. No one stops. The fog doesn't allow it. If you stand still too long, you vanish. You make it back to your street, though you're not sure how. Your legs feel heavy. Your head aches. You cough again. And again. You climb the steps to your lodging house. Your fingers fumble with the key. You look down and realize your gloves are streaked with something black and sticky. Not tar, not quite. Maybe fog's residue, maybe death's autograph. You get inside, shut the door.
And only then do you let yourself breathe deep and instantly regret it. Your throat seizes. You lurch toward the basin and cough until your vision sparkles at the edges. When it's done, there's blood in the water. Just a little. You wipe your mouth, shrug. That's just the air today. Victorian fogs weren't just weather, they were predators. They crept under doors, seeped through floorboards, and silenced lungs without so much as a whisper. And they always came back. Still you hang your shawl to dry. Light a candle, boil water, the smell of tea helps. A little. Outside, the fog claws.
At your window like it's trying to come in, you pretend not to notice.
You sit by the flickering candle, and the pain in your jaw begins again. Not sudden, not sharp. Just that low, insistent throb. The one that starts at your molar and spreads behind your eye like someone slowly hammering a nail into the back
Of your skull. You know this pain. Everyone does. Because dental care, here in the Victorian era, is something between a punishment and a dare. You press a hand to your cheek.
It's warm, swollen. You think back to that bread from 3 days ago. Too hard, too dry. It might have cracked something. Or maybe it's just the usual rot. Either way, it's going to get worse before it gets better. You could see a dentist.
Of course. But you know what that means. A man in a stiff coat and questionable boots, wielding iron tongs that look suspiciously like fireplace tools. An assistant holding you down while he pulls. No anesthetic, no warning, just the suggestion.
That you bite down on a leather strap and scream into your sleeve. And if you're poor, you don't even get that. Street dentists set up stalls near markets, pay a penny, sit on a crate, lose a tooth, no gloves, no antiseptic. And if they drop the tooth into a jar for collection, well, you try not to ask where the others came from. Historians still argue whether Victorian dentistry made things better or worse. Sure, extractions happened, but often by barbers, blacksmiths, or anyone with a strong grip, and no sense of empathy. You pour yourself a cup of lukewarm tea and swirl it around your mouth. It doesn't help. You try biting down on a cloth soaked in whiskey. It helps too much. Your head swims, your legs go numb, and for a moment, you forget which side the pain is on. You reach for your little tin of remedies. Every Victorian has one, filled with mustard powder, vinegar-soaked rags, maybe a clove or two if you're lucky. Clove oil is the miracle cure. Burns like fire, numbs like snow. You dab it onto your tooth and hiss as it sears your gums. Quirky fact of the day. Some Victorian women used powdered charcoal, not just to clean their teeth, but to paint them black, believing it made the rest of their complexion appear whiter. The things we do for beauty. You slump in your chair. The ache pulses in time with your heartbeat. You can feel your tooth throb. You hear it, almost. It whispers, promises of abscesses, of face swelling, of fevers that climb and don't come down. And you remember the boy in your building last month. Started with a toothache, ended with a priest. You wonder if that'll be you? Maybe you try to distract yourself. You pick up a book, but the letters blur. You trace the edge of the teacup with your thumb. You think of remedies you've overheard in the street. Rinse with brandy, bite a leather strap, pack your tooth with soap, pour boiling water over your gums. None of it works. Or worse, it does, until it doesn't. You look at your tools. A dull sewing needle. A fire poker. You wonder if you could do it yourself. Victorian self-surgery isn't common, but it isn't unheard of. Desperation makes surgeons of everyone. Historians still debate how widespread home surgeries were, especially in remote areas, but urban families, too poor for medical attention and too proud for begging, often turned to desperate acts. You think about going to the hospital, then you remember the smell, the rows of beds, the sounds. Hospitals in this era are less places of healing and more like waiting rooms for the grave. They reuse tools, reuse bandages, reuse beds, sometimes with the last occupant's blood still drying in the straw. Surgeons, brave men, bold men, men who believed in amputation before diagnosis, and if you're lucky, they'd hum a hymn while doing it. You always heard it helped them focus. No thanks, you hold your jaw and rock gently. The candle sputters. Outside, the fog glows faintly under a gas lamp, giving the night a ghostly shimmer. Somewhere, someone is playing a violin badly. You listen. It almost works. Almost. Then pop. A sharp burst of pressure behind your molar. A rush of warmth. You spit into a handkerchief and see a streak of red-black. The abscess has burst, and for a moment, just a moment, you feel better. You smile, that was your root canal. No dentist, no bill. Just pain, time, and a bit of luck. Or maybe it's just a reprieve. You rinse again with tea or whiskey. Whatever's in the cup now, your gums feel raw. Your fingers tremble, but the pressure's gone. For now. You look at the little mirror above your wash basin. You open your mouth. One less healthy tooth. One more dark spot in the back. But no more ache. Not yet. And that, dear listener, is how dental care works in the world of corsets and coal dust. By roulette. Maybe you make it through, maybe you don't. But either way, you won't be smiling in portraits. The next morning starts with lace gloves and a lie. You dab your cheeks with powder, chalky, a bit sweet-smelling, maybe laced with crushed pearl or arsenic, and you tie your bonnet with trembling fingers. The mirror doesn't lie. You look pale, tired, and slightly crooked on the left side, thanks to the lingering toothache. But you're going out, and that means putting on your best face, even if it's held together by pins, powder, and stubbornness. Today you're walking through the nicer part of town. Cobblestones are smoother here. The fog seems thinner, almost polite. And the buildings, tall, clean, proud, hide all their rot on the inside. You pass a group of women, parasols high, their laughter crisp and brittle like burned sugar. They nod to you, eyes skimming over your dress, your boots, your gloved hands, judging, measuring. You nod back, careful not to show your teeth. The reason for your outing.
A social call, you're visiting someone, a friend, a cousin, or maybe someone more complicated, a gentleman. Now, Victorian courtship is a puzzle box, locked within a series of smaller, equally confusing puzzle boxes. Everything is coded, the
tilt of a head, the pressure of a handshake, the distance kept when sitting on a drawing room settee. Entire novels are built around whether someone reached for the teacup before or after offering the sugar. And yet, outside the parlours and parlance of polite society, there's another world, one with no fans fluttered or gloves removed delicately, one where, quite frankly, the courtesies dissolve by candlelight. You've heard the rumours, you've seen the reality. Brothels outnumber bakeries. In some neighbourhoods, it's hard to tell which is which. A woman in a fine gown at the window might be a widow, might be a hostess, might be a companion, as the newspapers delicately put it. Historians still argue whether Victorian sexual repression fueled this explosion of secret indulgence, or whether it was the other way around. Either way, the contradiction is everywhere. Prim in public, passionate in private. Buttoned up by day, unbuttoned by gaslight. You pass a row of narrow houses, red doors, velvet drapes, a man loitering near a lamppost with a newspaper that never gets read. You don't stare, you just keep walking, but you know what's inside. The diseases don't care about social class. Syphilis in particular is the great equalizer. It takes dukes and dustmen alike, inch by inch. First a rash, then a fever, then madness sometimes. Or bones collapsing into themselves. And always the same end, silence. You know someone who has it. You're not supposed to, but you know. His hands tremble now. His lips have sores. He wears gloves all the time, even indoors. Quirky fact of the day. Some Victorians believed you could cure syphilis by sweating it out in mercury vapor baths. The mercury, of course, killed people faster than the disease, but at least they died shiny. You arrive at the home. Knock gently. A maid answers. She doesn't look at you, maids rarely do. You're shown into a parlour. Tea is served. The conversation is hushed, brittle, bouncing between topics like a paper fan in a stiff breeze. He enters. You both nod. And then the ritual begins. You sip your tea, eyes meet, not too long. You compliment the wallpaper. He comments on the weather. You laugh, gently, always gently. Too loud and you're vulgar, too quiet and you're dull. Victorian romance is a chess game played with lace pieces. Every compliment must be sandwiched in politeness, every glance chaperoned by the threat of scandal. A handshake can hold more meaning than a kiss, because one is allowed and one is not. You're invited for a walk, in public, with distance, 3 paces between. If anyone asks, you're acquainted. If anyone presses, you're family friends. If anyone sees the way he glances at you when he thinks you're not looking, well, they'll pretend not to. Historians still debate whether Victorian courtship rules protected women or imprisoned them. It depends on who you ask and whether they were ever caught behind a hedge with someone named George. You return to your lodging later that day, breathless and flushed, not from romance, but from maintaining posture for 3 straight hours. You sit, remove your gloves and stretch your fingers. One is bruised from holding the parasol too tightly. Your corset's been cutting into your waist again. You pull it off with a sigh. Beneath the lace, your skin is marked like a map. Indentations from boning, ties and buttons pressed too long, into flesh. You think of him. Not in a swooning way, this isn't a novel. You think of his hands, his smile, the distance he kept. You wonder if you'll marry. You wonder if you'll have the choice, because for many women, marriage is not romance. It's escape from poverty, from judgment, from spinsterhood, and sometimes from yourself. Still, you keep his calling card tucked under your pillow, just in case. Outside, the gaslights flicker again. The shadows stretch long. You hear laughter. A carriage door slams. Somewhere, someone is choosing between love and survival, and in the Victorian era, they are rarely the same thing. Night falls, and the veil between worlds begins to thin. Not literally, of course, unless you believe what your neighbour Mrs. Dandridge says, and you might. She's the one who claims her dead husband knocks on the walls every Tuesday, always.
Around the time she boils cabbage. Coincidence? She thinks not. You pull the curtains closed, not because of the fog, though it's there, but because of the feeling.
That sense that something unseen is just outside, watching through the glass with quiet, disapproving Victorian judgment. Because in this era, death doesn't wait politely behind closed doors. It sits in the parlour, draped in black crepe, sipping weak tea. You light a candle and sit at your writing desk. It's wobbly. The drawer sticks. You tug it open and find the mourning ribbon you meant to sew onto your collar. Still folded, still untouched. You were supposed to wear it for your cousin's passing. You still might. For a while longer, Victorians loved grief. They collected it. The room smells faintly of lavender sachets and ash. On the table beside you, a lock of hair tied with a velvet ribbon, a funeral card edged in black, and a little portrait in a frame. Post-mortem. You can tell. The eyes are painted on. The smile is still. Historians still argue whether the obsession with death in the Victorian era came from high mortality or from sheer aesthetic enthusiasm. But either way, death here isn't hidden. It's dressed up, photographed, preserved,
and displayed. You glance at your reflection in the darkened window. For a moment, you almost don't recognize yourself. Then you remember. The mourning brooch pinned to your chest.
That's someone's hair. Human hair jewelry was all the rage. Plaited, looped, braided into rings and necklaces. A little odd, maybe, but also oddly sweet. Keeps the dead close. Quirky fact of the day, there were entire fashion catalogues devoted solely to mourning attire, with sections like first mourning, second mourning, and half mourning. Yes, grief had stages, and each came with a dress code. You flip open your family Bible. It's full of dates, births, marriages, deaths, so many deaths. Children lost before age 5, cousins gone to fever, a note about Uncle Francis, and the unfortunate accident involving bees. You don't ask. You never do. You've been to séances. Everyone has. At least once. The last one was in a drawing room filled with velvet and candlelight. The medium wore a veil and used a bell that rang without being touched. Supposedly. You thought it was tied to a wire. Still, when the table shifted, when the candle flickered, when a voice whispered Eleanor from somewhere behind your shoulder. Well, you didn't sleep well that night. Victorian spiritualism isn't a fringe practice. It's mainstream. The elite do it, the poor do it. Even Queen Victoria reportedly dabbled. Communicating with the dead is considered both fashionable and practical. After all, everyone you know has someone on the other side. You pick up the mourning
photo again. You trace the edge of the frame. You wonder what she would think of you, of how long you wore black,
of how quickly or slowly you moved on. Outside, a carriage rattles past. You jump slightly, not from fear, from habit. Because in this era, silence is never quite silent. The houses creak, the pipes groan. The walls are thin, and if you hear footsteps where none should be, well, you probably won't investigate. That's how ghost stories start. You tuck away the photo, pull the curtain tighter, blow out the candle, but not all the way. You leave it flickering, a small ward against. Whatever lingers in the corners, you lay in bed. The sheets smell faintly of lye soap and damp. You think of those you've lost. You try not to count them. There are too many. Everyone has their share. Death is not dramatic here, it is ordinary. You remember Mrs. Beddoes across the hall. Her
husband passed last spring. She wears black still, speaks to no one, leaves lavender at his grave.
Sometimes you hear her whispering through the wall. I know you're near. I know it. And maybe he is. Historians still debate whether the Victorians believed in ghosts as actual spirits or as metaphorical echoes of unresolved grief. But in a world where death is frequent, sudden, and often silent, sometimes it's comforting to think someone's still listening. You turn to face the wall. Close your eyes. The gaslight outside flickers once, then steadies. You don't believe in ghosts, but just in case you sleep facing the door, the school bell rings, and it's somehow more ominous than church bells. You walk past the gates, past rows of stiff uniforms and scuffed boots, into a building that smells like ink, mildew, and wet wool. Always wet wool. The ceilings are high, the windows narrow, and every surface seems designed to echo noise. Footsteps, coughing, whispered threats of, "You'll get the cane for that." This is your education, or what passes for it. You file into the classroom and sit on a hard bench. There are no cushions, there is no comfort. Your desk is a slab of wood etched with the initials of bored students and scorched in one corner by an overzealous candle. You open your slate. The chalk is cracked. Someone sneezes and 3 others follow. No one says bless you. That's not what we're here for. The master enters. His coat is frayed. His eyes are tired. His knuckles are red, either from cold or from what he does with the cane that rests beside the chalkboard like an ominous punctuation mark. He says, "Good morning." You all stand, then sit, then recite. Victorian education is rigid. You memorize, you recite, you are corrected, loudly, with wood if necessary. Spare the rod, spoil the child, they say, and oh, how they love their rods. Historians still argue whether such discipline truly instilled moral character or simply created generations of repressed, anxious adults. Either way, your hand still stings from last week. You write your alphabet in ink that smells faintly of vinegar. If you blot the paper, you start again. If your margins stray, again. If you twitch or sneeze, or dare to glance out the window, where the fog curls around the bare trees like a ghost scarf. Again, your fingers cramp. You adjust your grip. The pen squeaks. A girl near the back is falling asleep. Her head nods once, twice, and then crack. The master's cane strikes her desk. She snaps awake, blinking, trying not to cry. Outside the classroom, children play. In the yard on breaks, but it's hardly joyful. The mud is knee-deep and the air smells like cabbage and coal. You've heard of schools with proper playgrounds, but that's for the wealthy. Here, you get a corner of the street and the warning.
Don't get dirty or you'll get the strap.
Quirky fact of the day. Some Victorian schools punish children by making them wear dunce caps, pointed hats labelled dunce, and stand facing the wall for hours. The idea was shame-based correction. The result? Probably a lifelong fear of triangles. The curriculum is simple. Reading, writing, arithmetic, Bible. If you're lucky, some geography. Maybe history, but mostly dates and dead kings. No discussion, no exploration. You learn to repeat what's written and never ask why. A boy near you gets a sum wrong. Not just wrong, off by 6. The master frowns. The cane rises, it falls. Once. Twice. The boy doesn't cry. You respect him for that. You meanwhile try to focus on your own slate. 5 times 6, 30. 7 times 8, 56. You whisper the tables under your breath like a prayer. Lunch is dry bread, maybe a bit of cheese if someone remembered to pack it. You sit outside on the steps, the stone cold even through your skirt. You nibble your food and pretend not to notice the rats near the wall. One of them has a white spot on its back. You've seen it before. It always shows up at noon. You've named it Inspector. You return to the classroom and try to read aloud. The book is crumbling at the spine, the pages worn by dozens of hands before yours. The story? Something.
Moral. About obedience, or silence, or both. You read carefully, slowly. Every word is a minefield. A mistake could bring scorn. A mispronunciation, punishment.
You watch the teacher's cane from the corner of your eye like it might jump on its own. Historians still debate whether Victorian literacy rates improved because of schooling or despite it. What's certain is that reading was a privilege. Not everyone could, not everyone was allowed to, and not all were taught the same way. Girls were often taught less, unless they came from wealth. You glance at the blackboard, Latin phrases, a bit of scripture. A quote from Milton scrawled halfway before the chalk broke. You copy it anyway. The final hour is handwriting, penmanship.
Is everything. Your letters must be perfect. Curls, loops, spacing, each judged like a ballet of ink. You dip your pen too deep. The blob spreads across the page. You freeze. Wait. No cane.
Just a sigh, dismissal comes with the ringing of a cracked bell. The sound echoes like it's announcing a trial, not a release. You gather your things, your shoulders ache, your fingers twitch. You walk home with the others in silence. Some talk, but quietly no one runs. You've learned that energy must be rationed. You never know when you'll need it for something worse. At home, you sit again. This time in the dim corner near the window, practicing your sums by candlelight. Your mother reminds you to keep your back straight. Your father glances at your letters and grunts. Sloppy, he says. You'll do better. Education, after all, is your only way out. If you're clever, if you're obedient, if you're lucky. But as you stare at the ink smudges on your fingers, you wonder out of what?
Exactly.
You wake in the middle of the night because the chamber pot is full again. It's not glamorous, but it's life. You grope for the candle and strike a match with sleep, clumsy fingers. The flare of light startles a beetle scuttling along the wall. You stare at it. It stares back. You both pretend the other isn't there. You shuffle across the cold wooden floorboards to the corner behind the curtain, the one sectioned off for your privy. There's a bucket, a rag, a jug of water. It's all very Victorian, which is to say, it's deeply unpleasant and slightly humiliating. Indoor plumbing exists in theory. The wealthy have it. The rest of you have options.
None of them good. In the morning, you carry the chamber pot downstairs, holding it at arm's length like a cursed artifact. Outside the back door is a narrow alley, a brick wall stained with decades of secrets. You empty the pot into the communal cesspool, an open pit that bubbles faintly like it's angry. The smell punches you. Your eyes water.
You gag slightly and look away. Victorian sanitation, dear listener, is 1 part inconvenience and 3 parts biohazard. There are public toilets, sort of. They're few, they're filthy, and most are for men. If you're a woman out in public, your choices are limited. You either go home or find a quiet alley and hope no one sees. Historians still argue whether the lack of sanitation stemmed from ignorance, indifference, or sheer logistical nightmare. But one thing's clear, cities weren't built to hold this many people, and certainly not what came out of them. The Thames itself, London's Grand River, is essentially a liquid landfill. It doesn't flow, it festers. The Great Stink of 1858 was so pungent that Parliament literally fled the building. Imagine a stench so overwhelming, it chased lawmakers out of their chairs mid-session. Quirky fact of the day. Some Victorians believed disease was caused purely by smell. Miasma, they called it. Not bacteria, not viruses, just bad air. So they fought cholera with scented candles and bouquets of herbs. Nice try. You pass a neighbour scrubbing the stoop with what might be lye soap, might be water, and hope. Her apron is stained. Her face is blank. Hygiene is a full-time job, and no one gets paid for it. You haul water from the pump down the street. It's a social ritual, lines of women and children waiting with buckets and pails, gossiping in whispers while pretending not to. You nod to the old man who always cuts the line. He has a cane. No one challenges him. The pump handle is slick from use. The water flows slow like it resents you. You fill your bucket. It's heavy. Your hands cramp halfway home, but you don't stop. Back in your kitchen, you heat the water for washing. It takes time. Everything does. You scrub your hands, your
arms behind your ears. You try not to think about what the water looked like before you boiled it. There's a tin bath tucked under the stairs.
It comes out once a week, maybe. Baths are a luxury. Water costs time, fuel, and space. When it is bath night, everyone shares the same water in the same tub. You hope you're the first. You're rarely the first. The soap is homemade. Harsh. It leaves your skin red, but it gets the dirt off. Mostly. And then there's the laundry. You boil the clothes in a pot. Beat them with a paddle. Rinse in cold water, then wring them out by hand until your knuckles turn white. Hanging them on the line in winter turns the shirts into stiff, frozen sheets of cotton that crack when you fold them. There's no bleach, no softener, just effort. Your underclothes, changed once a week, maybe, corsets, stockings, chemises, all sweat-soaked, soot-dusted, but still worn because there's no choice. You think about toilet paper. There isn't any. Newspaper, if you're lucky. Catalogue pages, if you're luckier. A sponge on a stick, if you're a sailor. Or nothing. You do what you have to. You open the window to let out the steam. Fog rolls in instead. Victorian houses are a constant war between what's trying to get in and what you're trying to get out. You clean the chamber pot again, you scrub the basin, you mop the floor with a rag on your hands and knees. Your spine aches. You're not even halfway done. And then the drain backs up, because of course it does. You poke it with a stick. Nothing. You pour boiling water. Still, nothing. It gurgles, then belches, then settles into a quiet, threatening silence. You don't ask for help. You just wait. If it overflows again, you'll figure something out. Victorian hygiene is a patchwork of desperation and denial. You scrub and boil and bleach with whatever you can find. But the smell always comes back. The rot always returns. And when it does, you light a candle, wave some lavender around the room, and hope no one notices. Because in this era, being clean is less about feeling clean and more about appearing clean, and you're getting very, very good at pretending. Afternoon sun seeps through the grime-flecked window panes, casting a watery light across the drawing room. You sit stiffly on the edge of a too-small settee, fingers folded neatly, back straight, posture perfect, because a lady is always watched. Even when no one's watching, across from you, Mrs. Penworthy lifts a porcelain teacup to her lips. Her pinky hovers. Her cough interrupts. It's dry, sharp, persistent. It echoes in the space between polite conversation and social dread. You force a smile. Everyone is coughing these days. A tickle in the throat, they say. Probably the fog. Probably the weather. Probably not that, but deep down, you know, everyone knows the walls are too close, the air too still. The teacups pass hand to hand, fingers brushing porcelain that's been touched by dozens before. You sip carefully. The cup smells faintly of rosewater and something else, metal maybe, or old breath. Victorian visiting culture is an exercise in elegance and contagion. You call on friends, acquaintances, distant relatives you don't like but must impress. And in return, they offer you tea, gossip, and a possible infection, tuberculosis, or consumption, as they call it, with eerie affection, is everywhere. It's romanticized, often seen as a disease of the sensitive and poetic. Pale cheeks, delicate features, flushed lips, like nature's makeup routine with a tragic twist. Historians still argue whether this glamorization was a coping mechanism or a side effect of artistic obsession. You've read the novels, you've seen the portraits, beautiful corpses, fragile heroines, dying slowly, tastefully, in lace-trimmed nightgowns. You shift in your seat as Mrs. Penworthy dabs her lips with a monogrammed handkerchief. The lace is darkened by a spot of crimson. She tucks it away quickly. You pretend not to see it? Quirky, fact of the day. Some Victorian beauty guides actually suggested mimicking the appearance of consumption. Pale powder, artificial blush, darkened under eyes. Death was a fashion statement. You glance around the room. Heavy drapes block fresh air. The fireplace smoulders with coal. The air is thick, close, full of invisible things. Germs weren't widely accepted yet. Not really. Most people still believed in miasma, bad air, as the source of illness. So they burned incense, opened windows after someone died. They never quite made the connection between coughing guests and dying hosts. You sip your tea again. It's lukewarm. The biscuit crumbles in your hand, leaving sugar dust across your skirt. You brush it off with a gloved hand. Across the room, a child sneezes. The governess dabs at his nose and tells him not to fidget. He stares at you with watery eyes. You smile. He doesn't. The conversation drifts to less dangerous things. A neighbour's unfortunate wallpaper choice, the new milliner on Bishop Street, a letter from someone's cousin in Bath. The tone is light. The subtext is dense. Victorian women excel at saying 3 things at once, while meaning none of them. You excuse yourself as politely as possible. Claim a headache. Not untrue. Back home, you wash your hands in cold water. Scrub beneath your nails. You change your gloves. Burn a lavender. Bundle. The scent fills the room, sweet, sharp, desperate. You settle into your chair and open a letter from your aunt. She's heard you've been making social calls again. She warns you to be careful, not just of scandal but of breath. She's lost 2 friends this year, one to the wasting, one to something unnamed. Both began with a cough. Your neighbour drops by to borrow sugar. You pass the tin through the half-open door. She thanks you, then sneezes. You flinch. She apologizes. You both pretend it's nothing. You close the door gently. Wash your hands again. Tuberculosis moves silently. It passes in shared teacups, in kisses on the cheek, in whispered secrets and exhaled laughter. No one notices until the weight loss
begins. Then the night sweats. Then the streaks of red on the pillow. It could be anyone. The maid, the milkman.
The man you almost danced with last spring. You sit at your desk and reread an old letter from a friend who died last month. Her handwriting is strong, looping, full of vitality. She was healthy once, lively, loud. You remember the last time you saw her? She said she was just a little tired. Everyone is just a little tired. All the time. You tuck the letter away, light a candle, and look out the window. Fog swirls again, ghostly and soft. You see a figure walking past, coughing into their coat. They vanish around the corner. You press your hand to your chest. Just a precaution, just checking. One deep breath, then another. Still clear, for now. You're in the pantry when you hear it, the soft skitter of something small and determined. You freeze, hand still hovering over the tin of flour. There it is again. Behind the sack of potatoes near the bottom shelf. You hold your breath. Then you slowly crouch, pull the sack aside, and there it is, there, staring at you, a rat, not large, not threatening, just present, unbothered, blinking slowly like it owns the place. You consider shouting, maybe throwing something, but deep down you know it won't matter. For every rat you see, there are a dozen more you don't. This one just had the manners to introduce itself. Victorian homes, regardless of size or elegance, are never entirely rat-free, or mouse-free, or beetle-free. The walls are thin, the foundations cracked, and the floors riddled with access points. If you're lucky, they stay in the cellar. If you're not, well, they crawl into bed with you. You gently close the pantry door. That flour, not going to touch it. You know better. Quirky fact of the day. In 19th century London, there were professional rat catchers who'd show off their kills in the street and sell live ones to taverns for entertainment. Patrons would bet on how long it took dogs to tear them apart. Lovely. Back in the kitchen, you swat at a fly and wipe down the counter. Everything is clean, or looks it, but you still see the tiny droppings in the corners, still hear the scratching behind the wainscoting at night. Sometimes it sounds like a dance, sometimes a fight. And then there's the hospital stories. Your cousin worked at one once, said the rats there were brave. They'd crawl over sleeping. Patients scurry across operating tables, even chew at bandages while the nurses' backs were turned. One night, she woke to find one chewing her hair. She cut it short after that. Historians still argue whether rat infestations were more severe in urban homes or hospitals, but in truth, both were perfect breeding grounds, food scraps, body heat, hidden corners, and, best of all, no one willing to talk about it. Because admitting you had rats was admitting you were poor.
Or negligent, or worse, typical. You hear another sound from upstairs, this one heavier. You freeze again, not a rat this time, probably a cat. Yes, the cat, Mrs. Witherspoon's borrowed mouser. She lent it to you last week in the spirit of Victorian neighbourliness, which often involves loaning out living things like umbrellas. It's an orange tabby with the emotional stability of a candle in the wind and a deep, abiding hatred for furniture. It descends the stairs now, tail twitching, ears
Back, it drops a limp mouse at your feet, as if to say, "See? I contribute." You nod. "Well done," you whisper, because sarcasm transcends eras. You scoop up the corpse with a fire shovel and toss it into the outdoor bin. The cat watches you. Judging, always judging. You step into the alley to empty the rubbish and nearly trip over another rat. This one is bolder. It doesn't run, just stares at you like it's waiting for rent. You blink. Not today. You mutter. And for a moment, you think it nods. The city is overrun. You know this. The newspapers print horrifying headlines. Child bitten in cradle. Rats invade bakery. Rodent found in soup. You try not to think about the last one too hard. You visit a friend that evening. Her flat is nicer, cleaner. You ask her how she manages it. Peppermint oil, she says, matter of fact. And prayer. You sip tea and pretend the scratching. Near the hearth is just the wind. Later that night in bed, you hear the familiar squeak of floorboards, a tiny scuffle near the footboard. You sit up, slowly. Hold your breath. There's movement under the dresser. You could get up. Light a candle. Investigate, or you could just pull the covers up tight under your chin and accept that you share this home, this bed even, with creatures you'll never quite evict. Historians still debate how effective Victorian pest control really was. They tried traps, poison, cats, even ultrasonic bells, though those mostly just annoyed people. In the end, the best defense was vigilance and denial. You fall asleep to the sound of something scurrying through the walls. You dream of larger rats, one wearing a top hat, another counting coins. When you wake, your bread is missing. You try not to take it personally. The carriage door creaks open and the smell hits you first. Not unpleasant exactly, just confusing. A blend of cheap soap, dust, boiled cabbage, something faintly medicinal, and perfume? Yes, someone tried. You're here for a tour. Not of a house, not of a museum, but of something far more grotesque, a workhouse. You're not checking in, you're just looking, observing, that very Victorian pastime of poverty tourism when the wealthy, or at least the wealthier than thou, visit, the destitute for an afternoon of moral discomfort and light amusement. You're with a small group. Women in gloves, men in stovepipe hat. A clergyman with very loud opinions about cleanliness and thrift. You keep your expression neutral. That's the safest face in any crowd. The matron leads you down a narrow hallway. Her shoes squeak on. The worn flagstones, her keys jingle like tiny accusations. "This way," she says. The infants are housed in the far wing. They're fed twice daily, bathed once a week, and rotated out for fresh air when weather permits. You nod. Everyone nods. It sounds sanitary. You pass rows of iron beds, each with a thin mattress and a scratchy grey blanket. In the corners, chamber pots, empty bowls, boots without laces. A child stirs in one bed, looks up, and stares. You pretend not to notice. The walls are whitewashed, the windows barred. The light is dim, filtered through soot and sorrow. Historians still argue whether Victorian workhouses were built as genuine safety nets or cruel deterrents. The answer, as always, lies somewhere between ideology and budget cuts. The matron moves, briskly. "This is the sewing room," she says. The women produce undergarments and uniforms for hospitals. Very industrious. You glance inside. Rows of girls, heads down, fingers moving like machines. You can't see their faces, just the rhythm of stitches. One girl drops her needle and flinches. You move on. You pass the laundry room. It's hot, damp, full of steam and the acidic sting of old lye. A man stirs clothes in a vat with something that looks more like an oar than a tool. His shirt is soaked through. He doesn't look up. Quirky fact of the day, Some workhouses use treadmill machines to punish the idle. Not treadmills for exercise, but giant wheels you'd step on for
hours, generating power for nothing.
just walking. Walking in place. For 8 hours. For discipline, you reach the dining hall. Long wooden benches. Slop in tin bowls. A grey mass that might be porridge. A slice of bread too small to argue with. The children eat silently. They've learned not to ask questions or seconds. You're told how many live here? Hundreds? You nod. You're told how few leave. You nod again. You ask where the infirmary is. You're led through another corridor, this one quieter, the air heavier. The infirmary is clean. Sort of. Beds in rows. Men and women with sunken cheeks and glazed eyes. Some cough. Some moan. Some stare at the ceiling like they're reading something only they can see. The nurse in charge is 20 maybe. Her apron is stained. She doesn't look at you. She adjusts a pillow beneath a dying man's head with the tenderness of someone who knows it won't matter. You step outside to breathe. The workhouse yard is a patch of mud and gravel. A few chickens wander near the fence. A boy sits on an overturned bucket, holding a broom with more handle than bristle. He stares at the ground like it owes him something. One of your companions remarks that the visit has been instructive. Another calls it humbling. You call it a lot, but no.
One says horrifying, not out loud.
That wouldn't be polite. Back in the carriage, you sit silently as the buildings slip past. Factories, smokestacks, rows of crumbling tenements. You see children playing near open drains. You see a woman shaking out a rug beside a body that
might be sleeping. Or not. You arrive home, step inside. Your fire is lit, your bread is fresh.
Your water is clear. You think about the girl with the needle, the man with the oar, the child on the bucket. You shake it off. You have supper to attend. You touch up your face in the mirror, pin your brooch, change your gloves. Your hand lingers.
Over the fabric. They were industrious, you think. Very industrious.
You're awoken at dawn by a noise in the chimney. A faint scrape, then a thud, then silence. You sit up slowly, heart already sinking. That sound, you know it. Everyone in your neighborhood knows it. You pull on your shawl and step into the hall. Downstairs, your landlady is standing near the hearth, arms crossed, mouth tight. He's stuck, she mutters. A boy, of course. Another one. In Victorian England, chimneys are cleaned not by brushes but by children, usually small boys, sometimes girls. The younger the better, the smaller the more valuable, because the tighter the chimney, the higher the demand. For tiny limbs, you crouch by the fireplace. From inside the flue, you hear muffled sobbing. He's wedged in a bend near the third flue, only 9 inches wide. You whisper something soothing. You lie outside. Someone is already climbing onto the roof to see if they can tug him up from above. A neighbor offers a rope. Another lights a fire in her own hearth to encourage movement. The logic is cruel, but common. Historians still argue whether this practice, known as using climbing boys, was a necessity or a national disgrace. Either way, the chimney sweeps fought hard to keep it legal. Cheap labor, disposable bodies. You help fetch oil to slick the bricks. You hear the boy cough, then cry, then fall silent. Your landlady mutters a prayer. Quirky fact of the day. The youngest recorded chimney sweep was 4 years old. Many died of suffocation, others of cancer from soot exposure, known grimly as chimney sweep's carcinoma. It was the first documented industrial cancer in history. The boy is eventually pulled out, soot black, shaking, alive but not untouched. He's given bread and told to try again next week. He nods. You ask his name. Doesn't matter, the sweep mutters. They don't last long. You want to be angry, but this is normal, this is routine. You've heard of boys who got stuck and were simply bricked in. Out of sight, out of mind. The fire lit anyway, the screams fading into chimney smoke. The boy is gone now, off to the next house. You sit by the fireplace, staring at the hearth like it might blink. The soot on the bricks still carries a handprint. Later that week, you visit a friend whose parlour has just been cleaned. She raves about how bright the flames are now, how clean everything smells. You nod, you sip your tea. You don't mention the boy, you never do. Because children aren't just workers here, they're currency, chimney sweeps, mill hands, street hawkers, mudlarks dredging the Thames for coins and bones, watercress sellers with baskets bigger than their torsos. You pass a group of them near the bridge, a few barefoot. One smoking a pipe no longer than his thumb. They jeer at a constable, then vanish into an alley. Children rule the streets as much as adults do, just with worse odds. You remember a little girl who sold matches near your building? You bought from her once. She smiled. 3 weeks later, she froze to death behind a bakery. The irony was noted, quietly. You read about her in the paper. One paragraph, no name, just match girl. Like she was a character, not a person. Historians still debate whether Victorian society saw children as economic tools or miniature adults. Either way, the result is the same. Scraped knees, stunted growth, and eyes too old for their faces. You walk past a school. The she bell rings. Children line up in rows, quiet, blank-eyed. The master shouts. A boy flinches, a chimney sweep cart rolls past you. You catch sight of a face peeking from under a heap of rags and brushes, just for a second, and then it's gone. That night, the fire burns clean, no sparks, no smoke, but you swear you hear crying in the walls. The letter arrives on black-edged stationery. You know what that means before you even touch it. The thick envelope, the heavy scent of starch and ink, the neat slant of the address. It's a death notice, and a formal one. Not a whispered word at the market. Not a tearful neighbour knocking with news. This is proper grief. With instructions, you don't open it right away. You just place it on the table beside the oil lamp and the saucer of half-eaten scones and let it sit there. Like a guest you're not ready to greet. In the Victorian era, mourning is not just a feeling, it's an industry. When someone dies, you don't simply grieve. You perform grief. You wear it, live in it, host it. Death becomes your shadow, and society watches to see if you're doing it properly. Eventually you open the envelope. A cousin. You barely knew her. Still the rules apply. You pull out your mourning guide, a little booklet that every proper household owns. It tells you exactly how long to wear black for different relations. 6 months for a cousin, a full year for a sibling, 2 years for a husband. If a child dies, indefinite. But that's implied. You set aside your grey shawl. Dig through the drawer for your crepe veil. It's stiff, smells faintly of dust and mothballs, but it'll do. Historians still argue whether these extended mourning rituals gave people a sense of comfort or just prolonged the pain. But the Victorians believed in grief as a moral discipline. You showed the world you were suffering the right way. You visit the dressmaker because of course you must. A new bodice, more modest than your usual. Perhaps some jet bead trim, understated.
But appropriate. You don't look her in the eye as she takes your measurements.
She doesn't ask who died. Quirky fact of the day. Queen Victoria wore mourning for Prince Albert for 40 years. Black gowns, black veils, black gloves. She turned an entire nation into one long funeral procession. You write a condolence note to the family. The script must be neat. The tone reverent. You avoid words like better place or resting now. Too sentimental. Better to say things like deepest sympathies, grievous loss, respected and cherished. You
attend the funeral. It rains. Of course it rains. You arrive in black from neck to heel. The veil is drawn low.
No colour, no smiles, no eye contact unless necessary. The procession moves slowly, measured in steps and size. The hearse is drawn by horses draped in velvet. Their hooves are muffled. Even the clatter of death must be polite. The cemetery is
muddy. The stone markers lean like tired mourners themselves. You stand in the mist, listening to the clergyman say things he didn't mean yesterday and won't remember tomorrow. But he says them well. After the burial, you don't go home.
You go to the wake. You sit in a parlour where the mirrors have all been covered, so no one accidentally glimpses a ghost. The clock has been stopped, the curtains drawn, the windows cracked to let the soul escape. You drink weak tea, eat small. Cakes talk in hushed tones. You say her name once, maybe twice, then never again. Later, you pass a shop window filled with mourning jewelry. Rings set with woven hair, lockets with miniature portraits painted in grey and ivory, brooches shaped like urns and weeping willows. You consider buying one, but you hesitate because you already have a drawer of such things. Little relics, tiny tombstones, all the people you're supposed to remember but don't know where to put. You go home and draw the curtains. You hang black ribbon on the door. You fold your usual dresses and store them beneath the bed. For the next few weeks or months, you will be seen only in mourning attire, because if you show up in colour too soon, people will talk, and not kindly. Historians still debate whether these rigid mourning customs were oppressive or protective, whether they shielded people from the chaos of loss or boxed them into performances they couldn't escape. You sit by the fire that night, veil off, face bare, holding the letter again. The ink has smudged slightly where your fingers touched it. You try to remember her face. Your cousin. Was it the one with the limp? The one with the ginger hair? You're not sure. You place the letter in the drawer with the others, neatly stacked, tied in black ribbon, a kind of paper graveyard. The next morning, you wear your black bonnet, and no one questions it. They just nod. Because mourning here is not an emotion, it's a dress code. The smell hits you before the door even opens. Not a bad smell exactly, just strong. Earthy, musty, a little fur, a little damp hay, a hint of droppings. You step into the hallway and there, sprawled across the tiled floor, like he owns the building, is Mr. Thistle, your neighbour's goat. Yes, goat. In the Victorian era, animals in the home are a fact of life. Not the pampered, leashed, cushion-sleeping kind you're thinking of, but somewhere between pet, livestock, and living furniture. Mr. Thistle gives you a side-eye. You step over him. Down the hall, a canary chirps inside a cage hanging from a nail hammered directly into the crown moulding. Below it, a cat watches, patiently, always watching. You pass another door and hear squealing. Pigs, you think, or a very emotional child. Either way, the sound is muffled by straw and shouting. It's not unusual. Victorian homes, especially those in poorer or more rural areas, regularly housed animals indoors. Chickens roost in the scullery, rabbits are raised under beds, goats are kept for milk, cats for mice, dogs for protection or warmth, and sometimes pigeons just happen. Quirky fact of the day: pigeons were once considered not only edible but desirable, especially the young ones known as squabs. Some households even raised them in rooftop lofts or attic corners. You too could live beneath a ceiling full of snackable birds. You pass a boy carrying a basket of ferrets. He nods like this is perfectly reasonable. You nod back, because it is. Inside your kitchen, you hear the familiar scratching under the cabinets. Not rats this time, your lodger's hedgehog. She lets it wander because it eats bugs. It also eats crumbs, buttons, and once half a playing card. You place a bowl of water near the hearth. The cat drinks first. Then the hedgehog waddles over and dips its snout politely. The cat does not object. They've made peace. Outside, someone's rooster is crowing loudly, repeatedly. You look out the window and see it strutting along the neighbour's laundry line like it pays rent. Animals and humans share space here. Not out of affection necessarily, but out of need. No pest control? Get a cat? Need eggs? Keep hens? Want something warm to curl up with that won't steal your boots? Try a small dog, and when they die, well, that depends. Some are buried in the backyard. Some are cooked, some are both. Historians still argue whether the Victorians truly loved their animals or simply saw them as extensions of utility. The answer, like most things, is yes to both. You once visited a woman who had 3 birds, 2 cats, a monkey, and a lemur named Arthur. The parlour stank. The drapes were shredded. The monkey had its own velvet pillow.
Arthur bit you? Twice. She said it was the French way. You weren't convinced. You step outside with a basket of crumbs and leftover crusts. The alley cats appear instantly, eyes shining like buttons in the dusk. A dog barks from a second-story window. Someone tosses a shoe in response.
The dog barks again. You feed the birds. Sparrows mostly. One crow, possibly sentient. You walk past a butcher's shop. In the window, pigeon pies, sheep's head stew, roast rabbit. Someone buys a tureen and asks if the pigeons are local. The butcher smiles. You don't ask what that means. Inside the apothecary next door, a man is buying leeches for his son's ear infection, apparently. The jar wiggles. You try not to look. Victorian medicine loved animals, leeches, maggots, frogs' legs for spasms, and of course, cod liver oil for everything from gout to melancholy. If it twitched and could be bottled, it was medicine. Later that night, you return home to find a pigeon on your windowsill, just staring. You try to shoo it. It doesn't move. You suspect it lives there now. You light a candle and read by its flickering glow. The hedgehog rustles beneath the table. The cat curls at your feet. Something skitters in the wall and gets chased. Life continues. You lie in bed, covers pulled high, listening to the symphony of the house. Claws, wings, fur, breath. You are never alone. You never really were. And maybe that's not so bad, unless it's the ferret again. The ferret does bite. You wake to a knock on the door and the unmistakable words, "Doctor's here." You sit up fast, too fast, and the room tilts slightly. Everything hurts. Your head pulses, your throat feels like it's been scrubbed with coal dust, and your skin is clammy with the kind of sweat that means your body is either healing or giving up. You swing your legs over the side of the bed. The floor is cold, and the blanket's damp from fever. You've been like this for days, maybe a week. Time has blurred, and now the doctor has come. He enters like a stage actor, coat flapping, bag swinging, moustache thick with authority. You've never seen him before. You might never see him again. But you nod politely because in this era, doctors are something between magicians and morticians. They might cure you, they might kill you, or they might just make the whole thing very expensive. Victorian medicine is a theatre of confidence, much of it unfounded. He takes your pulse, tells you it's a bit fast. You could have told him that. He looks in your mouth, nods knowingly and says, "A touch of humours." Humours, plural. He pulls out a small bottle, laudanum most likely. Tincture of opium and alcohol. For sleep, for pain, for forgetting what your name is. Historians still argue whether these tinctures helped more than they harmed, but one thing's certain. Victorians were very enthusiastic about prescribing things they didn't understand. The doctor examines your fingernails, presses lightly on your stomach, looks concerned, says, "You'll feel better after a purge." Oh no, Victorian cures are often worse than the illnesses. Bloodletting, emetics, blistering, enemas with tubes that look more like artillery. Or, if you're lucky, a warm mustard poultice applied to your chest while someone reads psalms aloud nearby. You agree to the laudanum. He writes a note for your caretaker. Boil water, keep her warm, limit excitement. You're not sure when your life last contained excitement. He leaves with a tip of the hat and a coin slipped quietly into his palm. You lie back. The rooms spin. Quirky fact of the day. Electrotherapy was once used to cure everything from hysteria to migraines. Patients were shocked, gently, or not so gently, with hand-cranked generators. If it didn't work, they'd just crank harder. The laudanum kicks in slowly. Your fingers tingle, your headache softens. You stare at the ceiling where a spider has spun a crooked web. It dances slightly in the breeze from the cracked window. You think of your aunt, who swore by powdered rhubarb for every ailment. She also died trying to treat gout with vinegar foot baths and emotional restraint. Her last words were apparently, "Stop looking at me." The next day, you wake feeling lighter, but not better. Your thoughts are fuzzy. You see things in the corners that aren't there. Maybe they never were. You sip broth. It tastes like hot dust. A neighbour visits. Brings peppermint drops in a bottle labelled Elixir of Life. Ingredients: camphor, turpentine, honey, and something she calls Spirit of Mint. You thank her. You will never open that bottle. Victorian shelves are filled with such concoctions: snake oil, toad paste, iron tonic, cures for female complaints and male deficiencies, pills that promised everything and delivered mostly constipation. One friend swears by cod liver oil. Another recommends leeches. Another says, "Just drink gin and go outside." You try the gin. You hallucinate Queen Victoria riding a hedgehog. You stop the gin, you try rest. You try breathing deeply. You try not to cough, but the air is cold and thick, and the coal fire only makes it worse. Your pillow smells like old flowers.
And salt. The damp won't leave the corners of the room, or your lungs. You remember someone saying it was better to get sick in the country. But the country has no doctors. Just wild herbs and women with stories about what root cures, what dream.
You take it, if they brought it. Your fever breaks on the 4th day, or maybe the 5th. You wake soaked in sweat and weak as laundry, but the pain is fading. The world is a bit clearer. You sit by the window in a shawl, sipping tea that tastes slightly medicinal. You've survived something, you're not sure what, but you're still here, which, in this era, is a minor miracle. You open the cupboard and find her still sitting there. Not her, as in a neighbour or maid. Her, as in the corpse of your great-aunt, propped in a chair beside the china, dressed in her finest gown and veil, hands folded as neatly as her obituary. You step back, not from fear, but from respect. She's not quite cold yet. Victorian death doesn't happen behind closed doors. It happens in parlours, in kitchens, in cradles. It happens quietly, then sits with you for a few days while the neighbours bring stew and nobody opens the windows. Too wide, because dying isn't the end. Not here. It's just the start of an elaborate ritual. You pull up a chair. Someone's already lit a candle near the foot of the body. There's a bowl of herbs on the table and a mirror turned to the wall. You instinctively look away. Victorians believed that death could trap your soul in a mirror's reflection. It sounds dramatic until you see the stillness of the room, the weight of it, and suddenly you want to turn every mirror. You straighten the folds of your aunt's gown. She's dressed properly, thank heavens. The undertaker came swiftly and with care. Face powdered, chin tied with a ribbon to keep her jaw from opening, lips stitched. Yes, stitched. That's a real thing. Quirky fact of the day. In wealthier families, the dearly departed were sometimes propped up for days to receive visitors in what's known as a death watch. Tea was served, stories were told, people chatted, with the body in the room. A few friends arrive. They bring flowers. Someone brings a cake. Children peek in, then run out giggling and screaming, unsure whether to be scared or impressed. Death
Is educational and omnipresent. You light another candle.
The air thickens with beeswax and lavender. You think she would have liked that. Or maybe she hated lavender. You can't remember. It's too late to ask. Outside, the hearse rattles by, on its way to someone else's final party. The driver's hat is tilted just so. His gloves pristine. Even funerals have fashion codes. The mourning parlour fills up over the next hour. Black dresses, starched collars, whispered condolences and the rustle of crinolines. No tears yet. That comes later. Once the cake is served, you watch an old man pat the hand of the corpse and say, "She always loved music." He says it like it's a secret. You believe him. The photographer arrives. Yes, photographer. Post-mortem photography is the final gift. One last portrait. He sets up the tripod, asks everyone to step back. A long exposure. A painted gaze. Her eyelids are closed, or maybe painted. Either way, she'll look serene forever. Historians still debate whether these photos were expressions of love or morbid mementos. But for many families, it was the only
photo they ever had of someone they loved. You keep your eyes low as the photographer works. The room is too still. You swear the clock has stopped. Then, tea. Because after death, there is always tea. Cups clink.
Sugar is passed. Laughter even bubbles up, as it does at any family gathering where grief hasn't quite landed yet. The body remains. It always remains. Center stage. A silent reminder that the conversation won't last forever. As the sun dips low, someone begins to hum a hymn. Others join. You don't. You just sit, hands folded, watching your aunt rest. Eventually the undertaker returns. Quiet. Professional. The body is placed gently into the coffin lined with quilted satin. Her hair is brushed one last time. The lid is not closed, yet. Not until morning. Not until the funeral. You lie in bed that night, and the house creaks differently, as if it knows someone's leaving. You think of the first time you met her. She gave you a bonnet, far too large. She made soup that always tasted like cloves. Now she's part of the air, the tea, the stillness. Victorian death doesn't end with burial. Morning follows like a shadow. Tomorrow, the veil goes on. Tomorrow, the procession walks slow. Tomorrow, the silence gets louder. But tonight, she's still here, and the candles are still burning. You lie in bed with the covers pulled high and the gaslight dimmed to its last flicker. Everything is quiet now. The guests have gone. The black veil hangs beside the door. The house smells of beeswax, breath, and yesterday's biscuits. You shift, slightly, and the bed springs groan like old floorboards. Even they sound tired. You stare at the ceiling. It doesn't stare back, thankfully, but it remembers things. Because sleep in the Victorian era is never just sleep. It's a nightly negotiation. Between your body and whatever lives in the walls, between your lungs and the coal-laced air, between your mind and the 1,000 tiny horrors it collected all day and now has time to sort through. Your feet ache under the covers. Your chest is tight. The pillow still feels damp from your fever days ago. You try to adjust, but feel a ripple beneath the sheet. Hopefully a wrinkle. Hopefully, you light a small taper. Just enough to glance under the sheet. No beetles, no rats, no sudden surprise visit from Mr. Thistle, the goat. Good. The flame casts long shadows, bending furniture into monsters. You snuff it quickly and decide to face the dark instead. You close your eyes. But the quiet here is full of noise. The neighbor is snoring through the wall. A pipe somewhere gurgles. Outside, a carriage rumbles past, its wheels clipping the cobblestones like distant thunder. Somewhere, a baby cries. You don't know whose baby, you've never known. But it cries every night, like the street's own lullaby. And then there's the creak from the corner. You always hear it, just after midnight. You tell yourself it's the wardrobe settling. You never open it after dark. Quirky fact of the day. Some Victorians feared spontaneous human combustion while they slept. Yes, really. They believed that poor souls, usually women, oddly, could simply burst into flame with no warning. The solution? Less brandy, more windows, or just faith. You hear a clink in the kitchen, a spoon settling in a cup. You haven't had tea in hours. You don't investigate. You've learned. Victorian houses live, they breathe, they remember, and they don't always appreciate being disturbed. Historians still argue whether the Victorian obsession with death, dreams, and ghosts was rooted in fear or fascination. But as you lie in the stillness, you realize it's both. Every night could be your last, and every morning, a small, thrilling resurrection. You pull the blanket tighter. You think of the girl in the chimney, the boy in the ward, the woman at the séance table asking if her brother is still near. You think of your aunt in her coffin, of the rat in the pantry, of the fog that might still be creeping beneath your door. You think of all the lives lived inside rules, rituals, lace, and
ash. All the people who made it through another Victorian day. And then, maybe, you fall asleep.
The candle gutters softly, and the shadows lengthen, but nothing in this room moves now except your breath. You've walked through soot-choked streets and bone-cold kitchens, climbed the stairs of the factory, and sat beside the morning veil. You've seen children vanish into chimneys, rats waltz across parlours, and fog wrap itself around the city like a funeral shawl. But for now, all of that fades. The coal fires are down to embers. The gas lamps outside flicker their last. Somewhere, someone draws their last breath, but someone else wakes to a new one. It's the way things have always worked, even here. Your heartbeat slows. Your fingers unfurl. You no longer feel the corset against your ribs or the sting of lie on your skin. You are drifting through a space no longer bound by parlours or prescriptions, morning gloves or matchstick girls. Just warmth, quiet, and the soft creak of a house older than your memory. Let the street sounds melt into nothing. Let the whispers behind walls stay where they are. You've survived another chapter, another day, and in this world that's no small thing. So let it all go. The soot, the sorrow, even the scent of tea, let it drift. Let it fade, let it sleep. You are safe now, and the candles are out.